Waushara Community Church presents the Mixing Bowl Podcast. Hey, church, welcome to another episode of the Mixing Bowl Podcast. It's Aaron here with Pastor Stephen again, and we're going to continue our conversation about Advent today and really Christmas. And today we're really getting into Christmas traditions. And so just looking at my notes here, I guess it's good just to start out. What is a tradition?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of traditions within the church, within our own families that we don't necessarily think about. And traditions are just something that we choose to do repetitively, and they could be a variety of things, right? Like your church has a tradition of every New Year's doing this. Like every February, we always have this. Like Mother's Day, we always give gifts to mothers, or, those are just traditions. A tradition is something that you've chosen to create, to repeat, with a specific reason in mind. Often, cherished, but they don't have to be, right? They're not set between every group of people has the same traditions or every church does the same things. They're often just created, your family probably has traditions. The way you go sit and eat dinner is probably traditions, right? Like, we sit down at the table and we eat, and we, Jenny often just serves most of all the kids, if not, and, that's the tradition. When I was growing up, the tradition was we all sat around the TV and watched TV together, right? Yeah. So the traditions are just what you've created. Sometimes they're intentional. Most of the time, I think they're not.
Right.
But I like to create traditional or intentional traditions. I think that's fun. But that's really what a tradition is, right? They're not a defined, hey, here's all the traditions. It's hey, we're choosing to do this on a regular instance, and this is the reason why. Sure.
And whether divided by age groups or maybe places of origin, things like that, we might ask the question, are traditions good? Are they bad? Is there no feeling, right? Like, how should we approach traditions?
Yeah, and I think that's the question, right? Like, you have this in the church a lot, and I don't want to start any arguments, so I'm not going to bring up any specific instances, right? But you have traditions, especially in the church, that have been like long-standing traditions. And what might happen is, and it's probably already happened, right? I've been here 9 months or whatever, and I've probably like nixed some tradition at this point. Hey, why didn't we do this? Well, the easy answer is I probably didn't know about it. Yeah. The other answer might be, maybe we're trying to create new traditions. Maybe we're trying to, the focus of that, right, wasn't what we wanted to be. So there's a thought process, at least in my mind, of like, hey, you genuinely have to think about the traditions that you're establishing, because I think those are really, really important. And they don't have to be like these very rigid, we can't do anything but this. Like, we can't change the way we have done this in the past. Like, it worked really, just because it worked well today doesn't mean it works in 5 years. Right. And so traditions can be amazing, amazing opportunities to worship. Yeah. They can also be really, really dangerous. And so I think that's kind of the intense struggle of what we have to do in the church, is we say, hey, this is traditionally what has taken place in the church. So, and genuinely think about it, right? Like, I'll go to a topic that might raise the blood pressure of some of our people, right? We have a select group of people, probably, right? I don't know for sure, but this has happened in every church I've ever served in, so I'm just assuming, right? That would prefer the hymns are the traditionally correct songs in the church, right? Well, 1,000 years ago they sung hymns, but we're not singing those hymns, right? The songs that David sung we're not singing those songs. And I would think that those would be more traditional. And so you have this idea of tradition of like, well, that's what is often the case. And I'll say it this way. I prefer 90s music over all other music. Why? Because that's when I listen to music the most.
Sure.
I was a kid. I listened to 90s music.
Yeah.
A bunch of weird genres came out in the 90s, like, that don't even exist. Like even Christian music, right?
Sure.
Like,
yeah. I love ska.
Yeah.
I listen to tons of ska.
I don't know if it still exists. Like, there's still bands, right? But it's not a main line, right? Like, there was like an alternative Christian scene. It was just honestly fantastic. It doesn't exist anymore, right?
Sure.
You either have, it's either trying to create worship music or just, hey, we're a Christian. Like, you don't have that like Reliant K singing just a weird, funny song, right?
Sure.
That doesn't exist in the truth. And it stinks because those are really great, helpful things to, give our young people opportunities to have music that's just better.
Sure. Well, there is a weird roadmap, I think, for why some of that stuff doesn't exist now. But also, we would say, with the example of Reliant K, which most of our congregation probably hasn't heard of, right? They got older.
Yep.
Some of those guys started working for churches and have invested their lives into being music leaders, worship leaders, as opposed to being on tour on the road, right?
Yeah.
They had a family, had kids.
Yeah.
So I think we need to leave room for the ability to negotiate changes.
Yeah, and so that's the challenge, right? Traditions can be really, really good. And traditions maybe last for 10, 20 years, and they were fantastic for the church. But if the danger that comes with that is a little of what you said, right? The danger of not being flexible to say, hey, life has changed, right? Yeah. To be flexible to say, hey, that's not working anymore. Because that can happen a lot with traditions of saying, hey, this intended to do this thing, it's not really happening anymore.
Yeah.
Well, we should still do it. Right, we had this situation in a church I served in where we had this picture in the prayer room of our church. I don't remember the full story of like someone commissioned it or someone painted it or whatever.
Yeah,
but it was super creepy. It was a picture of. I think it was meant to be worshipful, right? Like,
sure.
It was a picture of Jesus, but it had like. Jesus' face, like hidden image kind of situation all over the thing. So the picture just looked like it had like hundreds of eyes.
Sure.
And so like my kids wouldn't go in there.
Yeah.
And so like I would ask people like, hey, can you explain the tradition, the reasoning behind this picture? And they would be like, well, we don't really know. Or someone would be like, well, so-and-so donated that, and they were a big part of the church. And I'm grateful for all those things. Like, right, this is not a bash of those things. But I was like, we have people that actually don't want to go in the prayer room, not just my kids, like other adults that are like, hey, that's kind of creepy.
Might be time to.
Yeah, so I was like, I removed it and I just put it away. Like I put it away in a nice place that it wouldn't get damaged or anything. Cause it was it was like a painted, very nice in a really probably expensive frame. Like,
sure.
And, I was like, I don't want to, but then like the more I like searched, like the person hadn't attended the church in like 30 years and like it just, it became a thing, right? Yeah. Like it became a thing. The other danger of traditions that I think can happen is that they become so natural that we forget to see the significance of them. So we have a tradition. We do the same thing every year. We'll talk a little more about this as we talk about some of the traditions within the church specifically. But we do the same thing every year, and it's just like, yeah, we do it. Like, yeah, we should do that because we've always done it. And then what we find is important, no longer what is important. And it's okay at that point to say, hey, I think it's time to move on from this tradition. And because it just doesn't work anymore, because we've made it into nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Like if a tradition becomes instead of an act of worship within the church, but it becomes just an repetitious thing that our body has to do, and it's just we've always done that. Then we have to really go, I think it's time to move on from this. Yeah. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I don't want to waste energy. Traditions that revolve around like changing things or having events or whatever, they take a lot of work, and so I don't want to ask people to do that. So there's the danger. Really, those two things of becoming kind of complacent in the midst of them.
Yeah.
The beauty of them, though, is creating this excitement and anticipation for your church of saying, hey, when we gather together and we get the opportunity to worship and we get the opportunity to celebrate, we look forward, like, right? If we create a really cool, this is my hope, right, for the WCC Family Christmas, is that we create this just celebration that people are like, as this Christmas comes around, they're thinking of all the things they do with their family, but they're like, hey, my church family is going to get together and we're going to celebrate. Yeah. And we get to do it, and I'm so excited for that. And I'm going to make my favorite dish, and I'm going to wear my ugliest sweater, and I'm going to just come celebrate and worship with my church. Like those are the reasons to do traditions. Yeah. If they can really point us to Jesus, and we can be firm in that and excited and celebrate that, I'm all for it, right? If they're silly traditions, I'm all for it if they can be uniting for us or whatever. Yeah. But I think traditions, I think we have to really hold on loosely to the, like, hey, this is a tradition, right? The music that we are listening to today and singing that we like as a young, I don't know that you call us young, but younger. Middle-aged, yeah, we're in that category now. My kids just say, oh, you're old. The music that we listen to that we like in 30 years is not going to exist. It's just not. And there will still be, your one or two songs that have lasted the test of time, but for the most part, it's not. They're just not going to be there. And we're going to look back and go, why do we waste so much energy trying to hold on to those? And who knows? Who knows what worship will look like? My plan is that Jesus returns, and I don't have to worry about it.
Today would be fine with me.
Yeah, it's too cold. It's too busy. A lot of us, it's just Jesus can come back and take care of all that.
And I think it's good to negotiate between, for us, what's a collective tradition, what is maybe a familial tradition, and what is a personal tradition, and be able to have some sobriety in evaluating each of those differently. Yeah. Because it's okay if you have a tradition, right? We might have a tradition of, well, neither of us are really early morning people, but some people like to get up really early in the morning and study Scripture.
Yep. It's a great tradition.
It's a really great tradition. And I would never tell someone to stop that.
No, but don't invite me to join you.
There's a tradition my kids like during the summer where we just eat ice cream every day. My kids' doctors do not approve.
Yeah.
No. But I don't know that we're going to stop that tradition.
Do not approve.
Yeah. We're just not going to tell them anymore, maybe. But then when we gather together, there's different people every time, especially for Christmas, right? Yep. Depending on what day it is, there could be people from out of town, family visiting. Hold on to those things really loosely, because we're hopefully, I think we attempt to do this every time, is just listen to the Holy Spirit to lead us and guide us into what is helpful. I ask my kids, was that thing helpful or hurtful? And sometimes maybe it's neither. It's just a thing. Yep. But again, having that sobriety to be willing to ask good questions. If you know your personality, I hold on to things too tightly. Okay, well, breathe out. Say, do you need to do this? Do you have to do this? And is it only helpful to you, or is it helpful to everybody? And then hopefully you have a clear path to move forward.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? You have 300 people that are attending on a regular basis. Their desire is shifting. Their wants, their church background is different, where they've had church traditions from where they've come from. and none of those things are necessarily bad.
Right.
You just have a unique, hey, we've got a whole bunch of people here. And so, we try to, from a standpoint of leadership, like we try to say, okay, what fulfills our mission, right? We don't want to just do something for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. I've probably personally said this to probably a few people in the church, right? If you can find it in the community, right? The church doesn't necessarily need to do it. Hey, I can go to the YMCA, which is a fantastic thing. We're excited about there being one here in the future. But if I go to the YMCA and do that, like I don't need to come to the church and also do that, right? Like, so the church is designed to provide very specific things. It is this invitation to the community to come meet Jesus, right? It's the kingdom here on earth. Yeah. And it's supposed to be designed to be a representation and be the kingdom. And so what we will see in eternity should be represented as part of the church, not what we see of the world. And so there are things in the world that are fantastic things, right? Like I used to play in a church softball league. I'd totally play in one again if I could physically handle it. I'm not sure. But like that's a fun thing. But there are softball leagues all over the place, right? The church doesn't need to provide that. Yeah. If it has the ability, that's great, right? And so we want our traditions to be really intentional and thought through. And how does this, help fulfill our mission of being about Jesus and being about discipleship and being about love? And if it can do those things, let's do it. If it doesn't work, throw it out. Try again. Just, traditions come about because you're willing to say, hey, this is important to us as a people. And so I think it's fun, right? Like, in 5 years from now, we'll get to look back at this and go, hey, what's become a tradition here at WCC? And maybe get to celebrate those things. So
yeah. Well, as we pivot here, we have two more questions. What was a tradition that you grew up with?
Yeah, I had lots. So this is the thing, and maybe it's why I love Christmas so much. Yeah. And I don't know that necessarily like my traditions had to do with Jesus or anything. Like some of them did, right?
Sure.
But there's a lot of traditions that we just had growing up. Like we would get pajamas Christmas Eve. That would be like, there's a lot of families that open all their gifts on Christmas Eve.
Sure.
I don't know why. This is a tradition that I never got.
I think it's because they go to other people's houses on
No,
Christmas
yeah,
Day.
that's fair. And that's very fair, right? Like, we would get pajamas on Christmas Eve, but they would always be wrapped in newspaper. I think the intention was so that it was easy to find in the pile of stuff. And so I'm not sure, but it was always a fun, even if as I got older, it became, just shorts and a t-shirt, because that's pajamas as you grow older. Sure. And so it was just a fun tradition, right? We got ornaments. We talked about this before. Like I, as a kid, got ornaments every year and still have a few of them. Right. My kids get to carry on that tradition. We would always, I actually went to church when I was younger. This is actually kind of a cool tradition that I really love. So, my family got together. I come from a very big family. My mom has 9 brothers and sisters. And we would get together. Most holidays, we'd get together at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Their garage was like it was like, a second building behind their house. Sure. You didn't park a car in there. It was nice. It had a kitchen in it. It had it was a big open space. The family gathered there. I don't know why you call it a garage, right? There's literally a kitchen and a restroom with a shower. Like this is a full bathroom in this place. But so we would go to church. I actually went to church as a kid in a VA. Okay. My mom worked there. My grandfather was connected to the church and served in the church, and so the tradition would be we'd all go to church as a family. That would be when all of the family would show up to church, and after the service, we would push or walk back all the patients through the VA, which was really cool because I did that a lot growing up, and I just got to hear their stories, and it was always fun. And then me and my cousins and I were pushing patients all over the VA, returning them to their the rooms and stuff. And then we would go to Grandma's house, and we always ate the same breakfast. There was probably other things, but I just remember it's my grandfather's from Poland. I don't know if they ate it there or not, but we would always have Polish sausage and eggs, cut up Polish sausage cooked into our eggs, which whenever I cook that for people the first time, they're like, that's really weird. And I'm like, no, this is a family thing that I've always done.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we would stay at grandma's house pretty much all day. And so it was just a very intentional time to say, hey, we're focused on family. We drive around. There would be times we drive around to see Christmas lights, and we would, we had all these things that every year we chose to do these things because they were important to our family, and
sure.
which is fun, right? It's fun to do that, and we've created similar things within our own family now, right? We're not sure 100% what we're going to do this year, right? We used to, when we were in Iowa, there was a place that had lights. It's just a guy's house. Lived out in the country, because everywhere where we lived in Iowa was in the country.
Yeah. And
he would just probably a quarter-mile stretch at his yard, and it was just covered in different, all kinds of random, you got some Disney characters, and you got some, animals, and you got all kinds of just things, and nativity scenes, stuff like that. And so, we would go do that. We stay home for Christmas. We like being together, just the family. Our extended family is welcome to join us. We do family presents. The majority of the presents are family presents that we actually open up slowly throughout the week. And they're usually activities or board games or stuff that intended to be, hey, we're going to do this together.
Sure.
And so there's just an intentionality and a potential beauty, right? There's traditions we started with our kids that we don't do anymore because they've kind of outgrown them, or it's too much work. But that's, it gives me, as where I'm at in life now, it gives me a sense of being able to celebrate what Jesus has done and say these things are important for these reasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good. I don't remember having a lot of traditions growing up other than, my mom's love language was giving gifts.
Sure.
And so every gift, everybody had to watch, right, and be present for that moment, and just slowly go through that process of opening gifts together. But outside that, probably the only tradition that I really look back and see, I'm sure there might have been others, but I can't remember. In high school, I sang in madrigal singers. And so for me, high school started sophomore year. And so for all 3 years of high school, every year we're preparing for this feast that was in December. We had to learn and memorize 32 songs.
Yeah.
Full costumes. The
Madrigals is very cool.
Yeah. The whole cafeteria in the other high school was decorated for this. It was a big deal, but I think my junior year, there was an outlet mall in Kenosha out on the highway that would call and hire us to come out and just sing through the mall. And so it was this random thing, but as a high school kid, I thought, well, somebody's paying me to come sing songs? That's awesome. We'd go sing for, who knows? It was probably 3 hours and we got $50.
Yeah.
But we had so much fun. When I think back on Christmas, through my teenage years, that's what I remember the most, was just singing these songs. And I think that's shifted a bit culturally. Part of the reason I hold on to it, those are the good memories I have of Christmas. We don't really do much for Christmas in Korea, so I kind of lost that, lost that luster to me. But when I think back to then, I think very fondly, those are all, some of them were just fun Christmas songs, but a lot of them really I held on to because they were the songs we sing as the church about who Christ is.
It's the one time a year you'll hear, high school bands playing some worship music.
Yeah. Oh, well, last question. What are some traditions within the church?
Yeah, I think we'll just stay focused specifically on Christmas because that's kind of our conversation.
Yeah.
It depends on the liturgy of your church. Liturgy is just, I'll put it in simple terms. It's the calendar for the church. It's if you have a strong liturgy, I would call them high churches. They would have a planned schedule throughout the year. You read this scripture, you sing these songs. Yeah. There's no real deviation. So you went from one of those churches to another. You would actually be on track to hear the same sermon for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So if you have one of those backgrounds, you had a lot of very specific traditions. It's interesting. I would be curious to know outside of here, because I'm not even sure of the tradition here, right? Yeah. Outside of here, this church WCC, what the Advent kind of celebration has been, because Advent might be a newer thing to people. Advent is a huge Christmas tradition. So Advent starts the first Sunday, not December 1st. It just happens this year it is December 1st.
Yeah.
So Advent can be actually 28 days, I think Advent can be. And it is the celebration. Advent means to wait for, to anticipate. It's a celebration and anticipation of the birth of Jesus, right? And the celebration of those seasons. Each week has a theme. Those themes traditionally vary, so it's interesting, like depending on which church tradition you have. And so, and then there's an intentionality behind it, right? During Advent this year, we're doing Jesse Tree, which is not a traditional. There are a lot of churches that have done Jesse Tree across the denominations, right? But traditionally Advent, you light candles every week. The candles have significance. There's 3 purple, 1 pink, 1 white. They have significance in what they mean. The thing is, these traditions aren't like biblically grounded.
Sure.
Right? Like they are and they're not. They're all pointing to a lot of these traditions, and we'll talk about this in the next podcast too. A lot of the symbolism, they come from Christian traditions in terms of like, hey, you find this in the Bible, but we've kind of adopted it to celebrate. And so like Advent is a way for the church to say, hey, we're traditionally going to focus on this. So you have a lot of things. Like one of the big ones is like the tradition of the nativity scene, right? Which I have loved the nativity scene as from a child. It's kind of this evolution. So my grandparents had this really old school nativity scene that had everything in it was plastic. And so like me and my cousins, we would sit on the floor because it had tons of animals and lots of people. And we'd sit on the floor, and during Christmas time, we would just play with that thing for a super long time.
Yeah.
As I grew older, it was interesting. As I grew older, and I was like kind of understanding the nativity scene, I came to the conclusion of like, well, you can't put Jesus in the nativity; he's not there yet. But then I started to read the Bible as like a young adult, and I'm gonna hurt a little people here. I think I challenge them a little. Like I love the nativity scene. We have a couple in our house. They are like, I think they're all children. Ones like for our kids to play with.
Sure.
But the true nativity scene, you should just have an empty, barn or something with animals in it, right? Like Jesus isn't there. Mary and Joseph are there. The wise men don't show up for another year and a half.
Yeah.
So there's no way
condensed.
You can't depict it well.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to depict it like, scene by scene and have like 3 or 4 of them, because I don't, biblically when the wise men show up, they're not even there anymore. They're in Egypt. And so there's this like, oh, like the things have really changed. The story changes. And I think it's okay, right? It's okay to establish that. And this is the tricky part about traditions, especially within the church, of like, hey, is this biblically accurate? Is this biblically accurate? And if it's not, is it okay that it's not? Like, I think the nativity scene is totally acceptable, right? Like, it does not declare something egregious. It doesn't declare something that's untrue. Like, Jesus was born, put in a manger. That's all biblical. It was prophesied about. It was. It was the reality, the story you see in Luke 2, like it happened, right? There were animals probably present. It's the Mary riding in on the donkey. We don't know that Mary had a donkey. Like, we have no idea. That's not a biblical thing, right? Like, we don't know any of those stories. But it's okay, right? It's okay to say, hey, this is a tradition. So you have traditions like that in the church, right? That every Christmas you do this. Every, Easter we always do this, right? The church is full of those traditions. And my encouragement is, and something that I will personally do, right, as part of the leadership here is look at those and go, hey, why do we do this? And should we do this? And then if we should, are there things that we should change or adjust that fit who we are right now today, right? That how do we reach our kids as well as our adults? How do we integrate all of the people of the church into the tradition that we're doing, rather than just say, hey, we've always done this, do it too, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things, early on in youth ministry that I think someone taught me was, don't come into youth group like when you're announcing, right? You're getting ready for districts. You're doing all the preparations. There's a lot of work there, right? When you're announcing districts, they're like, don't sit there and go to the kids that just showed up for the first time. Don't be like, man, we went to districts every year and it's been so awesome. And you're just talking about all these like stories that these kids have no connection to.
Yeah.
And they're like, don't do that because it kind of alienates those newer kids. Explain to them the excitement of what's coming, like why you get to participate in this. And so that's the beauty of traditions. Hey, we as a church have done this for years. We're excited about the things that are coming in the celebration. Here's how you get to come into them. Yeah. So we have to balance that in the church. Like, how do we balance our traditions being honoring to the Lord, and them being intentional for the people that are currently present. And so I think that's that's why we have a beautiful scene of the nativity scene in the front of the church. But is it biblically accurate? Well, no, because none of them are, right? Like, think of the Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. That is it's a beautiful painting. Terrible picture of the Last Supper.
Yeah.
They didn't sit at a table like that. That's not how they ate. They would not have all been sitting on the same side, right? Jesus served there. He was not the center of the, he was, right? He was the center of the attention, but he wasn't the center focus of that. Like, it was for him to say, okay, you guys have to serve like I've served you. Yeah. And so but it's okay, right? It's not bad to have that picture. It's just, we have to understand what's real. And then use them to celebrate. I think it's great to use the traditions of the church to just have an incredible time of celebrating the Lord. We want our traditions to drive us towards better worship, better community, better discipleship.
I could think of a bunch of things that are worth talking about, but I think anytime we're able to celebrate, enjoy, and teach Scripture more accurately, those are really great ways to create traditions.
Yeah.
And everything else we'll hold with open hands.
That's right.
And let them be what they're going to be.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back, church, with the second half of this episode, probably in a couple days, as it's still about Christmas. So thanks for joining us for this episode, and come back and listen to the second one real soon. Bye.
Play sweet elevator music.